Hello everyone, I'm Hannah Young and I'm going to be your course instructor on this online Higher Politics course. This is through FIDA, the Futures Institute at Dollar Academy, and I'm just delighted that you've decided to come on this journey with me in this academic year. Our live platform is going to be launched tomorrow, the 31st of August, and I'll be able to give you your logins then, and you can access then the forum so we can discuss certain issues that arise in the course. And the course is really a mixture of asynchronous and synchronous teaching and learning. So asynchronous because you really need to be independent in your learning, and then synchronous because I offer live support through text and also through synchronous, so live time Zoom sessions and drop-in office hours to support you whenever you need that. So let's take a look at what I want you to do today, and you can continue on with this for the week. I'm unsure about the time allocation you have for this course, so it might be a good idea to let me know that so I can manage your expectations and mine in terms of the work that you are going to complete this week and next. Okay, so let's have a look. In the first section, we have a welcome to the course where I go through what you will study, why politics is important, and you can click on this video here and watch a video I made for you. But of course, you know why politics is important because you're studying it, and that's a good choice. Politics Connect. Okay, and then in this part here, I talk about what you will study. Now, I'll just go through this with you just now. So we have 3 units in higher politics. The first one is political theory. And in this section, it's the one we're going to start with. We look at power, authority and legitimacy. Now, a lot of people think those 3 concepts are the same thing or they're interchangeable. And it's just not the case. We're going to look at examples of where leaders have power but no legitimacy, or legitimacy but no power, and where authority fits into all of this as well. We look at 2 particular theorists that the SQA require of us, and that is the work of Stephen Lukes and Max Weber. And I have all the notes that you need. You don't need to buy any textbooks for this course. Everything you need is uploaded as PDFs, sometimes Word documents for you to access. If at any point you are struggling to print off any material that you need, just drop me an email and I'll help you with that. The second aspect of the political theory unit is a study of democracy. So we study direct democracy. And basically what that is where people vote directly for, in relation to political decisions, so they don't have representatives like MPs or MSPs. And then we look at representative democracy, which is where you vote for a candidate to represent you, usually in a parliament. And we look at relevant theorists there as well. We look at Plato, Dahl, Schumpeter, and many others. And then we look at a comparative analysis of 2 political ideologies. And the ones I've chosen are conservatism and socialism. So not necessarily looking at political parties, although we can use them as examples. We're looking at the ideas behind these ideologies, and rather than looking at political parties in specific countries. We come to that in Unit 3, but this is a particularly interesting topic, and we compare things like the way in which these different ideologies view human nature. So are human beings, do they need to be led? Do they have like a paternalistic need to be led by the educated elite? Or should people just be left to their own devices? Because in this case, perhaps socialism as the ideology has more faith in human nature. We also compare things like how these 2 ideologies view the economy. And we also look at the nuances within these ideologies, because we can't just label, theorists as conservative. Some of them are new right conservative, like Ayn Rand, for example, and we look at her in detail. Or they might be traditional conservatives like John Locke or Thomas Hobbes. And so we look at these kind of ideas. In socialism, we look at revolutionary socialists like Karl Marx, who you will have heard of, Rosa Luxemburg. And we also then look at individuals like Tony Benn, and we look at the third way. So there are lots of different nuances within these ideologies that it's really useful to know. Okay, now Unit 2 is political systems. So political systems relate to how societies, countries, states are organised. So countries and states tend to be organised with 3 branches of power authority and hopefully legitimacy. So we have the constitution. So a constitution can look like many different things in many different countries, but basically it's like a blueprint for how that society should be organised, how politics is organised, how the branches are organised, where the power resides, the rights that people have or maybe don't have, how easy it is to amend constitutions. And you will maybe realise that this Unit 2, Political Systems, is a comparative analysis. So what we do here is we look at the US political system and the UK political system and compare them. We also then look at the executive branch, which is basically, well, we have the president and his cabinet in the US, and we have the prime minister. So we look at the UK government as opposed to the Scottish government in this unit. So we're comparing Boris Johnson and Joe Biden. Imagine that. Okay, and then we look at the legislative branches as well, and the legislative branches relate to Parliament in the UK, which includes the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and in the US we look at the Senate and the House of Representatives. So legislative branches are the law-making bodies in a political system. A lot of people confuse that with what is the judiciary. The judiciary are the law, those that sort of interpret the law. So we have the highest courts in the land, the Supreme Courts, and we look at them in relation to the US and UK, and we look at case studies as well, where people have tried to test the power of the executive and whether they have acted ultra vires, which means beyond the scope of their power. So that's a really interesting topic there. Okay. Then we move on to Unit 3, which is political parties and elections. So we're looking at the dominant ideas, and I've chosen the SNP because I think that, SNP is the ruling party in Scotland, and I think it's important that we understand their main ideas, their dominant ideas in the party. So that's what we're looking at there. We will also look at the theoretical a theoretical analysis of voting behaviour. So if you've done higher modern studies before, you will be familiar with voting behaviour. But where that's different is in higher modern studies, you look at things like the extent to which age, class, media, maybe single issues, gender, that kind of thing impacts voting behaviour. Whereas at higher politics, we're looking at theories of voting behaviour. But you can draw upon some of the ideas that you've learned in higher modern studies for that. But if you have not studied higher modern studies, you will not be hindered by that. And finally, we look at the way in which political parties campaign. How do they get people to buy into their message, their manifesto? So we look at grassroots campaigning, the knocking on doors, the phoning up of individuals to try and get them to vote, and how, political parties turn floating voters into core voters if they can. We also look at the impact of social media there as well. So that might be of interest to you there. Now, just so you're aware of the assessment process, for political theory, a 20-mark essay will appear in this section. And so I don't spend any time teaching you the 12-mark essay for this. So all of the tasks that I set are leading up to a 20-mark essay in political theory. And you will do a 20-mark essay on power, authority and legitimacy, a 20-mark essay on democracy, and a 20-mark essay on conservatism and socialism. And I guide you through how to approach these essays with video content, PDFs, writing frames, all that kind of thing. In Unit 2, this is where the 12-mark essay appears. And interestingly, all three of the issues that I talked about will appear in the paper. So unlike Unit 1, where 2 out of the 3 will appear, in Unit 2, all 3 topics will appear. So that is the legislative branch, the executive branch, and constitutional arrangements. All 3 topics will appear in the final exam in 2022, as long as that goes ahead. So it's important to think, well, if you're feeling like you're overwhelmed with work, you've got lots to balance out right now, you might think, right, well, I'm going to reduce what I've got to do by just covering one, either constitutional arrangements or executives or legislative branch. Now, if you're going to go and study higher politics at university or law, it would be my advice to you to try and do these 3 things, because a good understanding of this will underpin your undergraduate degree. I will say, just to be fully transparent, the constitutional arrangements one is the most dense of the 3 topics. So again, if you're looking to really reduce down what you've got to learn, executive or legislative would be my advice. And then finally in Unit 3, the 20-mark essay will appear here. So you'll have one 20-mark essay you will do for me on dominant ideas of SNP, one on theoretical analyses of voting behaviour, and one on political campaign management. However, though again, like with Unit 1, only 2 of those 3 topics will appear in the exam. Okay, so that's what we're going to learn. Now, as you know, the assignment is not part of the 2022 arrangements, and so it's all on the exam. Now, because we don't know what's ahead, because we know what it's like to live through chaos in education and late announcements, I'm going to keep examples of your work as we go through, just to build up a bank of evidence. But don't let that worry you. Don't let that, instill fear that you think, well, if I do a bad essay, that's going to go towards my mark. It's not. We're looking for examples of your best work, and there are so many opportunities for you to demonstrate your progress. Okay, we're not looking for acing, to ace the first essay. Although if you do that, that's great. We're looking for progression. Okay. All right. Now, in this online course, I talk about the things that you'll learn, the skills you'll develop, and also I should mention at this point paper 2. So paper 1 is the essay paper, and paper 2 is the source paper. There are 2 questions in this paper. There is the 8-mark text comparison question, and we practice these questions all the way through the course. And then there's a 20-mark data handling question, which some people don't enjoy. It's about interpreting data, and it's electoral results, electoral data. But don't worry about that. I have a video where I take you through step by step how to approach that question. It is tricky. It's a skill that you won't have picked up necessarily if you've done higher modern studies or higher history before. It's quite specific to higher politics, but do not let that faze you. We'll probably attempt that in around October time, I think, just to make sure that you're prepared for your prelims. Now, a word on prelims. I do split prelims for online students because you're all working at different rates, and so in order to make it a fair assessment, I split the prelim and try to make it fit into your exam diet in your school. So that could mean 3 separate prelims, but I will speak to your schools about that. So you might not be tested on everything. Of course you won't in the prelim. You'll be tested on what you've done. Okay, so don't let that faze you. Okay, then the course goes on to developing a digital learning mindset and what you need to be a digital online learner. Well, I'm sure you already have had lots of experience of this already, learning in lockdown. But really, it's about, setting goals for yourself. I set goals for you as well throughout the week, each week. And just about trying to think, what do I need to do to move on, and understanding that and knowing where to go if you need help. Now, I'm your first point of contact for that at Dollar Academy. All you've got to do is email me and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or can you help me with this? There are no silly questions. I'm here to help and support you. So please get in touch. It's better to let me know you're struggling with something than to struggle on your own. If you have support for learning arrangements or individual assessment arrangements, just let me know. Your school will administer them by giving you extra time or separate accommodation or dictionary, or whatever assessment arrangement you have is fine by me, because it's your school that will be administering that. But perhaps if you have some specific learning need that you want me to know about, so for example, it could be text, font size, colour of paper, just let me know and I can adjust any materials to help you with that. Okay, now if you want to, if you've got time and you want to stay curious, I have some recommendations for wider reading. These are not books that you need to buy. They're books that you might want to look at. Periodicals are really useful in higher politics. So these are weekly or maybe monthly or quarterly publications that you can gain access to. Some of them have education packages, and your school and library might already have them. But sometimes I use articles from these periodicals. if you wanted to put a book on your Christmas list, Prisoners of Geography is a great book, because really you're looking at geopolitics, specifically when you're looking at, the first 2 units. If you're going to study law, The Secret Barrister is really a great read there. And these, if you're looking for political theorists, if you're really interested in theory, then these are great recommendations here. All right, so let's go on to the first unit then. So the first unit is power, authority and legitimacy. We've talked, I set you that video to watch, and that's contained in this section. So we're not going to dwell here. We're going to move to the what are dimensions of power. Now, in this section, I've uploaded a PDF, which I would like you, if you're able, to download, print off. You may just like reading it on a screen, and that's absolutely fine by me. These are the notes that I would like you to print off, and the notes that you're going to need to help you write the first essay. So it's an overview of the 3 concepts of power, authority and legitimacy. So I would read them. You have your own ways of making your own notes. It could be a bit of highlighting, a bit of note taking. You can highlight this text, copy it, and then put it into your own notes, however you choose. A diagram here explaining how power, authority, and legitimacy are interlinked. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is note down some manifestations of power. So how is power demonstrated? How can you see it? Now, of course, some power is in the shadows, but think about political power. Think about what's going on in the world right now. Think about what's going on in Afghanistan. Think about how that relates to, the power of the Taliban. The political terrorism that we saw yesterday. I'm recording this on Saturday, so I'm talking about Friday, the 27th, I think it was, where we saw or heard of the attack by ISIS-K on the Taliban. So political terror on political terror. I've never heard of an example like that. It was absolutely staggering. And another example of how that region is completely destabilized. And today, Saturday, the 28th, you may have heard that we, Britain, have halted our evacuation plans in Afghanistan. So again, political power in action. So there are so many examples you could use there. So recent examples, let's try within 5 years. For a recent example, note the date, write down an example of a political decision that maybe has resonated with you. It could be to do with rights that are granted or rights that have been challenged. It could be about pressure groups, Extinction Rebellion, XR protesting in London. That could be an example of that. Okay, economic power. So in a capitalist society, there are lots of examples of economic power, something that Marx warned against. But Marx, interestingly, said that people need to understand that, experience capitalism to understand its evil. Now, that is his view, not necessarily mine. But you can maybe look at economic power. That could be related to the gender pay gap and how some genders are discriminated against long term as well. It could be to do with pensions. It could be to do with transparency in pay. It could be to do with 0-hour contracts. If you've done modern studies before and did social inequality, you will have studied the impact of income inequality on individuals, particularly women. You could look at universal credit. That's been in the news recently as well. And then military. Well, lots of examples here. You could use recent ones. Afghanistan could be an example here too. So the ability to wage a war. It could be terrorism as well. If you're interested in terror groups, you may have studied international issues for higher modern studies and the terrorism. That's what we teach at Dollar. You might look at Boko Haram, ISIS, ISIS-K, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda. You could look at Jewish fundamentalist groups, Christian fundamentalist groups that use military power, not necessarily through through an army, but individually. But military power tends to be seen with regards to states. When states commit acts of terror, that's called legitimate political violence, as you will have seen in that video. You could use examples of what's going on between Israel and Hamas there. There are so many examples, unfortunately, there. Okay, so just one example of each would be great. Note it down there. You don't need to submit this, but it's just to get your mind thinking in this kind of framework. And then we've got the first theorist that the SQA wants us to look at. This is Stephen Lukes, and it refers to his 1974 book about the radical view of power. And he divides this into 3 aspects: decision-making, non-decision-making, and manipulating desires. So that is an introduction to Lukes. We go into Lukes in much more detail, and we'll do that next week. And then I put in some other theorists here. I've already mentioned Karl Marx, and that's Antonio Gramsci there that you could look at. Then there's an analysis of authority, and then the second theorist that the SQA want you to look at, which is Max Weber, and his view of authority: traditional, charismatic, rational, legal. And you can have a read of that too, and making your own notes is a good idea. Then Niccolo Machiavelli, infamous political theorist who wrote The Prince in the 16th century. An interesting read there if you want to have a look at that. And then legitimacy here as well, and how that links to theory as well. And then we've got I find that word very difficult to say. I think I've stumbled over it many times already in this video. Legitimacy and electoral systems. Okay, so having a look at some electoral data here. And this refers to the 2015 general election, and I realise that this is obviously there are more up-to-date examples, but in a way it doesn't really matter in this case. We're looking at the way in which some election results using first past the post, and if you've done modern studies at National 5 or higher, you will have probably looked at first past the post, the winner takes all, and how that impacts on legitimacy. Think about that. Let's look at this here. If in 2015 the Conservative Party gained 36.9% of the vote share, that means that more people didn't vote for them than did, and yet we regard first past the post as a legitimate electoral system. Fair? Maybe not. But it's an interesting thing to think about, and that kind of figure has really replicated itself in many elections in this country, and individual constituency elections as well, with some people just winning by a handful of votes. But your concept of legitimacy can be formed from reading the notes, thinking about what you think about legitimacy, what makes it legitimate. Think about North Korea. There aren't free and fair elections there, and yet the people, because the people give Kim Jong-un legitimacy, maybe through fear, maybe through love, who knows, they regard him as the legitimate leader. So think about the impact of hereditary leadership, passing down power through generations. No democracy, but still legitimacy, still power, still authority. So think about that. Then a reference to Aristotle and Rousseau, who are mentioned in the piece there, the text above, and then some sort of deeper kind of thinking questions. Imagine an absolute monarchy. So that's where there's no elections, no consultation. The monarch makes no attempt to gain the consent of the people and never asks them their opinion. However, there is no opposition to him. So that's not really a question. Well, that's just... So number 4 is to imagine. Number 5 is, would Weber view the monarch as legitimate? Why or why not? Then, what would the monarch have to do in order for Aristotle and Rousseau to view him or her as legitimate? So these are like thought experiments, but just to get you thinking and connecting political theory with thought experiments and also real life examples. And then finally, there's a quotation here: without legitimacy, a government can have power, but it cannot have authority. Now, I don't want you to write an essay on this. I just want you to write your reflection, your view on this. It can be, a paragraph. It can be a couple of lines. It's tricky. It requires thought. It requires you to take a pause and think, what do I think about this? If a government has no legitimacy, but it has power, does it actually have authority? Think about examples of where you can see this in the world. Yemen is a good example of this. And if you don't want to use the word government there, you could just use leader if that fits better with your example. So think about an example, think about political theorists that would feed into that. That is tricky, but we're building up. We're going from sort of lower order thinking skills to much higher order thinking skills there. So if you find that challenging, it's because it is. And challenge is a really good thing. So try your best. There's no right or wrong answer here. I just want to see what you think. And hopefully by the time we're ready to talk about this, our forum will be up and ready. But if it's not ready, you can just email me your thoughts. Okay, I'm really sorry that not everything is ready on time. such is life, I'm afraid. So I've got some case studies to give you a bit of a prompt here. This is about Yemen's president and his struggles with the Houthi rebels and how Saudi Arabia fits into that. And then Kim Jong-un, who I've already mentioned, could give you some, well, he's a rich source of examples for the Higher Politics course, as is Donald Trump, former president of the United States, and thinking about how he made so many executive orders, which are basically laws that he can just sign away, and without the consultation of Congress. Congress can stop, the Senate can stop Donald Trump's executive orders, but it doesn't stop him, didn't stop him making a significant number, even in his first week. That's not uncommon for presidents to do, really, because what they do is they try to maybe overturn what the previous president has done, especially if maybe they're from a different political party. Okay, so that is that. Now, you don't have to do these tasks. You may wish to do them. It depends on time. But this is what I want you to do for this week. So you've got the 7 things to do from... 7 class questions here. Okay, so that's really what I want you to do. That's the sort of minimum. That's what you do need to do. And then if you've got time and you want to explore this further, have a look at these tasks. They relate to the 2 case studies, and will help you write the 20-mark essay. But of course, you're managing your own time. I'm not dictating the time you spend on this. So be sensible, use your common sense. What have you got time? What have you got the capacity to do? And then do that. So do the 7 things. If you've got time, do these 3 questions here. But remember, get in touch if you've got any issues with printing, or any other issue at all. And until I give you the logins and email you with the logins for this course, we'll just communicate via email, which will appear on the screen just now. And I'll be in touch. We'll make a time for a synchronous, so live Zoom session. You don't have to have your cameras on. You don't have to have your microphones on. You can just message in the text box or the chat forum. If you'd like to have your camera on, you are very welcome to do that, and your microphone too. You've met me, it's just me, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know you and teaching you and learning as much from you as you might learn from me as well, because I'm always interested in what you think. Okay, so I'll be in touch. Have a great week. And I'll be in touch tomorrow with your logins for our platform. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.